Okay, you guys, so this week we are going to be talking about critical thinking. It's something that we all are capable of possessing. It's not something that it's not a skill that is exclusive. So we all have the capability to have the skill of critical thinking. Some of us have greater amounts of it, meaning we are more advanced, and some of us are a little bit less advanced. So this lecture is not supposed to, pinpoint who has more, who has less. We're just talking about how to have these critical thinking skills and how to have it exemplified in small group communication or group settings in general. So we're going to be talking about a couple different things. So let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so let's go over our lesson outline for this lecture. We're going to go over poor sharing. So we're looking at information underload, and we'll talk about what that means in a second. We're going to talk about critical thinking frozen solids. This is when critical thinking breaks down. Then we're going to talk about confirmation bias and then false dichotomies. And then we have our second part of our lecture that has a whole different set of agenda items. So let's go ahead and get into it. Learning outcomes, we're going to analyze the adverse effects of excessive or insufficient information quantity on group decision making and problem solving. We're going to explore the role of mindsets in defective decision making and problem solving. And we're going to describe and analyze groupthink as an ineffective group decision making process. So, a lot of different things we're going to accomplish today. Okay, so information underload. So information underload, we're looking at, it's referring to an inefficient amount of information or inadequate input available to a group for decision-making purposes. So this often occurs in groups because an individual member sits on critical information and doesn't share it with the group. So this is when group members are withholding information from the group, information that can be actually pretty useful. Um, and that's why we have sitting on critical information here. So it's a phrase, sitting on critical information, not literally sitting on critical information, obviously. But that's what we're looking at when we're talking about poor sharing or information underload. We're talking about withholding information from the group that could potentially be effective later on. So for the cockpit crews, there's a study of cockpit crews flying large commercial planes revealed that crews who shared little information did not perform as well as crews who shared a greater quantity of information. 70% of all civil aviation accidents and near misses during a 5 year period reported by the NASA Safety Reporting System were caused by either improper transmission of information from one crew member to another or by failure to transmit vital information at all. So, to break that down, withholding information, any amount, any type of withholding of information can be and is detrimental to the group. So make sure you're not doing that. And also, information underload is usually a problem of too much closedness in a system. So the general solution to this problem is a greater openness in the lines of communication. So I told you guys at the beginning of the semester that when you are having um, your groups, and you're getting in your groups, you're discussing, you're going over what to do for your group presentation, um, there needs to be a sense of openness. There needs to be a sense of camaraderie. But everyone needs to feel like they have an open say or equal say in what the group does. Because when we close off those opportunities to voice our opinions, we're forcing others to not voice their opinions. And that opinion and those ideas could be very great for the group. But if we have a closed system, we're not allowing ourselves and our groups to have a little bit more of an open communication style. And that's what we want in group settings. Okay, so I want to try this demonstration with you. So I'm going to have you guys spell out the word shop. So while you're watching this lecture, spell out the word shop. Now, what do you do when you come to a green light? So the vast majority of you might unthinkingly, so unknowingly, reply stop to the question that I answered or asked. And why is that? Because the spelling of the word shop narrows our focus to rhyming words, even though the correct answer does not rhyme. So our minds are set to view the world in a particular way, even if this is inappropriate. So the idea here is when we have critical thinking, sometimes we are always on the go, always just want to get things done, always busy, busy, busy. Okay. Especially as students. Trust me, I was in your guys' shoes. And sometimes when that happens, we don't really have time to stop and think. We don't really have time to sit there and be like, okay, let's the logical, reasonable, critical answer to this question. So in that demonstration, I had you guys spell out the word shop and asked you a question, and I expected an answer. That's a very fast paced kind of process. But if you guys had a little bit more time to think about it, you probably would have been able to realize if if the demonstration worked on you, you would have been able to realize that if you had a little bit more time, you would have answered the correct answer, which would be to go, right? Because I asked the question, what do you do when you come to a green light? Green light means go. So you would answer go, not stop. So that's what the demonstration is. And it's a great example of when critical thinking breaks down. And then, so for perceptual mindsets, these are psychological and cognitive predispositions to see the world in a particular way. So what we're looking at here is we all born and raised with particular mindsets about the world. We are told that some things are true, some things are bad. We're told some things are amazing, some things are horrible. You should avoid them at all cost. These mindsets are instilled in us via our parents or childhood. And it's not necessarily a truthful mindset. So, what we need to remember is that these mindsets that are instilled in us from childhood and our parents they interfere with effective group decision making and problem solving. And the reason why is because we are prepared to receive only certain messages and ignore the others. We are conditioned to view the world narrowly. So, for example, in the world, in American society, in the past, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily true today, and I'm not saying I necessarily agree with this mindset. Actually, in fact, I don't agree with this mindset, is that college is the only thing that will get you to the next step in your life. That was the mindset just 20 years ago. And that's why everyone pushed for college. That's why everyone went to college. And you didn't really see anyone that didn't go to college. And if you didn't go to college, you were outcasted, right? That is a perceptual mindset that we as a society had, unfortunately, about 20 to 15 years, 15 to 20 years ago. It's still happening today, but we're seeing a lot more acceptance of trade schools, of charter schools, of other types of schooling that will be upheld and viewed as just as effective as regular institutions, higher education institutions. Now, I am also a person that went through my bachelor's and my master's. So, I mean, and potentially my doctor as well. So, I'm obviously more on the traditional side of education, but I don't think that traditional education is the one all be all. I believe in my mindset that if you get an education, regardless of what type, as long as it's quality education, then you should worry about anything. So that's a perceptual mindset change. So the perceptual mindset we originally had was that college, higher education, traditional education was the one all be all. And that's slowly changing, which is good. Okay. This video that I have linked here, it's going to be a part of your discussion. So we're going to go ahead and continue. Okay, so this is not from the textbook. So these are things that I came up with on my own via research. So, four characteristics of critical thinkers. Having an open mindset, looking for evidence and reasoning, recognizing bias, and striving for understanding. Those are the four characteristics of critical thinkers. So let's go ahead and break that down. So, one, having an open mindset. So, this means being receptive to new ideas. And this is where the open communication I talked about just briefly a little bit ago is so important. Having an open mindset also means being open to new ideas in the moment. So, it's not talking about a stagnant, okay, I have an open mindset starting here and ending here. It's an ongoing process, right? It's an approach to learning new things, especially those that challenge our preconceived notions. And being open minded is also being willing to admit we don't know everything, but we can keep learning, right? It's an ongoing process. If you ever think that you know everything, trust me, you do not know everything. Okay. So be open minded and be humble. Looking for evidence and reasoning. So, critical thinkers look at the bigger picture when trying to understand a concept. So, in order to do this, they must know how to find reliable and factual information. Comprehensive research techniques help us find relevant information, synthesize it, and make informed conclusions about a topic. So, it's really important that when we are challenging our mindsets, that we look for evidence and reasoning as to why potentially our mindset that we have might be wrong or it might be right, and we have evidence to back it up. Recognizing biases or biases. Students should understand that we bring our own prejudices and biases to every decision we make. It is important to be aware of them and how they influence us. So, we all come into scenarios or situations with preconceived biases or notions of what is true and what is wrong. And it's important as a critical thinker to be okay with the possibility or maybe just entertain the idea that what we are believing and what biases we have may not be correct. And if we can recognize that we might be wrong and recognize that we have a bias, then we can be a little bit more open and be a little bit more critical. And then striving for understanding. So, critical thinkers strive for in depth and meaningful understanding. They gather and assess information that is supported by evidence or a reasoned argument. And the goal is not to find the one correct answer, but to have comprehensive knowledge of a topic. So, I'm like, this part is really important because critical thinking is not a start and stop process. It's an ongoing process. So once you find that one solution, that one correct answer, that's cool, but you need to continue past that. You can't just shut off the critical thinking. You have to go on in your day-to-day life with these skills. Okay, so here's a little quiz. It's not graded. Which of the four characteristics do you think is the most important? So go ahead, take a look at this, pause the video if you need to, and select your answer. And remember your answer. Okay. So the importance of critical thinking. So it increases confidence in our ability to analyze and evaluate information, empowers us to trust the choices and decisions we make, aids us in adapting to changes more effectively and positively, and then challenges our own assumptions and the assumptions of those around us. So that's how important critical thinking is. Okay, confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the result of a mindset, of a perceptual mindset. They go hand in hand. When we have this perceptual mindset, we have a certain bias that confirms that our mindset is correct. So, confirmation bias is our strong tendency to seek information that confirms our beliefs and attitudes, and to ignore information that contradicts our currently held beliefs and attitudes. So, we tend to listen to and watch those who reinforce our pre existing opinions and beliefs. And this is where it can be kind of dangerous. Um, Confirmation bias is a prime example of a mindset that can produce a defective decision and problem solving process. Okay, so for rationalization of disconfirmation, so Confirmation bias is the process of finding evidence that already supports information and a belief system and a mindset that you already believe in. So you're looking at evidence to support that. And that's confirmation bias. You're looking for things that directly confirm what you believe without looking at the counter evidence, without looking at the evidence indicating why you might be wrong. And rationalization of disconfirmation is when you are confronted with that evidence saying, hey, this isn't correct. You double down and say, no, this is correct because of this, this, and this. Or you say, oh, well, that might be true, but I still believe it. That's rationalization of disconfirmation. Okay. Okay, so a plan. So this is a plan to combat confirmation bias. You should always seek discomfort. So since most group members will be predisposed to seek confirming evidence, someone will have to perform an error correction function for the group. So what this means is if someone says something that is a little bit absolute, a little bit too set in stone, and you raise your head or you tilt your head because you're a little bit confused about it, that's probably a clue that something is off. There's something about what that person said or suggested that might not be foolproof or might not be factually correct. So you should seek that and you should correct it. You should seek discomfort. Vigorously present disconfirming information to the group. So be persistent. Members will usually ignore information that disconfirms a strongly held belief unless you assert yourself. So this is the idea of see something, do something. So if you see that something's incorrect, make sure it's known that you believe that it's incorrect, and then make sure to be able to produce evidence and reasoning as to why it is incorrect. If you just say you just think it's incorrect, that's not going to help the group and it's not productive. So make sure that you have your evidence already built in. Play devil's advocate. So develop the habit of challenging the assumptions and claims of those defending a decision or solution in your group. Do it in the spirit of problem orientation, which is testing group decisions before they are implemented to produce the best group results. So this isn't say to be a jerk. This isn't saying like disagree with everything your group says. What it's saying is play devil's advocate. Say, okay, well, let's look at this way and let's look at how we can challenge this to make sure that we are being accurate in what we're presenting. Once you determine that there's confirmation bias happening, look for other members of your group who believe the same way. If they also believe that something in the group is not going appropriately in terms of being truthful, you should seek them out and see, like, hey, let's band together to make sure that this doesn't go forward. Because what if it does, it's going to be disastrous. Okay, false dichotomies. So this is either or thinking. So be suspicious of absolutes. So false dichotomy is the tendency to view the world in terms of only two opposing possibilities when other possibilities are available, and to describe this dichotomy in the language of extremes. So this is what we call God and devil terms. So God terms, if you think about, if you look at Christianity, um, heaven is depicted as this wonderful paradise. And then hell is described as this horrible, molten lava, disastrous, gastrous, horrible place, right? So there's completely two ends of the pendulum, right? There's the very, very good, the very, very bad, right? And sometimes when we're presented with these potentially two options, we are given the godlike terms and the devil-like terms, when in actuality, it might not be that extreme and it might not be that absolute, right? So we want to make sure that we're not doing this because we can't present information to a group and say, if we don't do this, then we're going to fail. That's an absolute. You have to think about it and you have to come to a group consensus of what you're going to do. So employ the language of provisionalism. So when engaged in a group discussion, speak in terms of degrees. In degrees meaning to what extent an argument is true. You'll be using terms such as sometimes, rarely, occasionally, mostly, usually, etc. So you should always avoid terms like always, as I just said, always. Avoid terms such as always, never, or impossible. Okay. Okay, so multiple choice question. What is critical thinking? Go ahead and pause the video here so you can answer the question. Make sure to notate your answer. And then this is open response question number 1. So if you see a news story on social media, what can you do to determine if the information is credible? Go ahead and write your answer. You'll be posting this answer from this lecture in your discussion board. And that's what our discussion will be mainly centered around. There'll be a couple different things in the discussion board for you guys to do. And then ask yourself these questions. Does the question or do you question the authenticity of information you see on social media? And then have you shared a post or video that you found out later was misinformation? So go ahead and think about that and then go to the discussion board to answer these questions. And then this is the answer to the multiple choice question. D, the ability to analyze information objectively using reliable evidence. So let me switch gears here. Okay. So this is part 2 of our lecture. Okay. Okay. So we're going to talk about groupthink. We're going to talk about excessive cohesiveness. We're going to look at main symptoms of groupthink. We're going to look at closed-mindedness, uniformity, and then preventing groupthink. This will be a very fast pace, so this part won't be long. So what is groupthink? You probably have heard it before, or maybe you haven't, and that's okay. But groupthink is a mode of thinking that people engage in when they are deeply involved in a cohesive in-group, when the members' strivings for unanimity override their motivation to realistically appraise alternative courses of action. So groupthink is the process of if someone presents a group with an idea, and if everyone in the group is programmed or persuaded to think a certain way, they're going to agree with what that person is saying. So it's kind of like a hive mindset, if you've heard of that term before. And how does this occur? This is due to cohesiveness and concurrent seeking. So again, cohesiveness, a couple weeks ago, we talked about being a good thing, and it is a good thing. But when we have too much cohesiveness, we aren't allowing for any critical thinking to occur. If we're all like minded, if we all agree on the same things all the time, we need to be aware that maybe, I'm not saying like monitor it to where there are disagreements, don't force disagreements, but you need to have critical thinking hats on and think about, okay, am I just following or agreeing with the group to get things done? Or should we be critical about this and actually think about it? That's what you should be looking at. Frequently, members fail to see issues that could be challenged and positions that should be questioned and alternatives that should be explored. Even if they do recognize such problems, they choose to go along in order to get along. So that's what we're looking at in that part. Okay, so here are some um, uh, main symptoms of groupthink. We're going to go over a couple of them, but this is just a really good graphic for you guys to keep in mind. So, some main symptoms arrogance. So, this is a major one, but basically, what we're looking at here is in addition to an inflated sense of power, groups sometimes overestimate their morality. So when we have groupthink, we think that we're all powerful. We think that there's nothing that can stop us, there's nothing that can destroy the group, right? We have this idea that just following the group is the best thing for us. And it's inflating that leader, the leader of that group's sense of power. It's making them feel more powerful. Okay. Closed mindedness. This is when we're clinging to assumptions. So, manifested by rationalizations that discount warnings or negative information that might cause the group to rethink its basic assumptions. So, the idea here is that we are so ingrained in groupthink in this scenario that any type of disagreement, any type of um, feedback, negative feedback, feels like an attack or feels like it's coming from a place other than the task at hand. It feels like a betrayal. And that's the closed mindedness that we're talking about. Uniformity, this is maintaining uniformity of opinion and behavior among groups. So, this is group monitoring where we ensure that everyone in the group has the same mindset, which, again, not saying don't be cohesive, definitely be on the same page, but it does not mean that you have to have all the same opinions. If you guys have disagreements, you should voice them. And that's all. That's what we have for this week. Spring break is next week, and I'll be spending that whole time grading and getting stuff back to you, and also preparing for the second half of our semester. Make sure that you emailed me for check-in dates, and I'll reply to you to indicate when and if I can meet on the date that you proposed. But yeah, that is today's lecture or this week's lecture.